From Microbe TV, this is TWiP, This Week in Parasitism, episode 117, recorded on September 21st, 2016. This episode is brought to you by CuriosityStream, a subscription streaming service that offers over 1,500 documentaries and nonfiction series from the world's best filmmakers. Get unlimited access starting at just $2.99 a month. And for our audience, the first 2 months are completely free if you sign up at curiositystream.com/microbe and use the promo code microbe. This episode is also sponsored by Drobo, a family of safe, expandable, yet simple-to-use storage arrays. Drobos are designed to protect your important data forever. Visit drobo.com to learn more. Hi, everybody. I'm Vincent Racaniello, and joining me here in New York City at Columbia University Medical Center, Dickson Despommier.
Hello, everybody.
And Daniel Griffin.
And hello, everybody, also.
But it's going to have a new name, right?
Hello, everybody.
No, the medical center.
Oh, right. It is. It's been renamed. That's true.
Do you know that, Daniel?
This is news to me. I did not know this.
Well, now, we
Pray
reveal.
I'd have to go look it up on my wait a minute. Here, I have my email right here on my phone. I will tell you exactly what it is because who was it that told us? The dean?
No, actually, we learned it from Steve Goff.
Well, no, I got an email telling me.
Oh, I didn't get an email.
Well, of course, you're retired.
That's true.
It has Irving in the name.
Correct.
Irving and his wife are in the name, and I don't have it here because I've archived it already, so it's not on
Mr. and Mrs. Irving.
Although I bet I could look it up in the news. Columbia Irving Medical Center. Let's just see if we can quickly. Now, of course, we already have a cancer center. I need to do news. Maybe it's already been announced. Here we go.
Aha.
It's already in the news. Wow.
But of course.
PR Newswire.
Remember, we're the last to know.
Columbia University and New York Presbyterian announced naming of medical center campus for Herbert and Florence Irving.
Herbert Irving, that's right.
It is going to be called Columbia University Herbert and Florence Irving Medical Center and New York Presbyterian / Columbia University Irving Medical Center.
Right.
The institution's installed a...
It rolls off your tongue.
There's a banner on the footbridge across Fort Washington Avenue, which...
Amazing things are happening here. That one?
Yeah, that one.
That's right. Amazing,
Boy,
period. Things
so that's the story, and you didn't know. I got the email this morning. Have both of you gentlemen been well? Dixon, have you been well?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a lovely day. Nice.
Yep, just got back from France, by the way.
You were in France?
I was.
I didn't even miss you.
I know. Well, you were gone, too. That's
what part of France? Montpellier?
No. I flew to Paris, and then from there we drove to Le Havre.
To do what?
To attend a meeting called Positive Economy Forum, right. And at which the keynote speaker was Salman
Rushdie. What did you talk about?
And I missed him because I was there for them the second day to the third. He was there the first day, so I missed him. Too bad.
No. And Daniel, have you been well?
I've been well.
Have you been sailing?
I've been working a lot, actually. I've been sailing a little, but working a lot. I'm covering the wards, as they say. I'm the attending, one of the two attendings on the inpatient infectious disease service, along with Pete Gordon. And we have been very busy with a lot of interesting cases. Actually, one of them I will treat you guys to. The one that we just admitted this morning, I'm going to present with you guys as our mystery case.
Daniel,
nice.
As we move from season to season, are there changes in the kinds of infections that you see, or is it all the same throughout the year?
No, it definitely changes.
Yeah.
And that's always important to know, particularly this person that we'll learn about is, I call a returning traveler. And depending on where you go, you want to know what's going on as far as the seasons there. Is it the rainy season? Is it, the winter? Is it? That's right. No, and it changes.
Disease is ecological, Dickson.
You better believe it.
Unless you get it in the hospital.
No, it's got tons of ecology.
That's still ecology. It's the built environment, right?
It's the nosocomial environment. That's right.
All right. Well, speaking of travel, we're back in Thailand from our TWiP 116 case. Why don't you summarize it for us, Daniel?
All right. And as I like to say, for everyone tuning back in and for those of you tuning in for the first time, Do you tune into a podcast? I'm not sure.
Sure, why not?
This is a
You bet.
36-year-old Thai man. He is from the northeast part of Thailand, and he came in with abdominal distension. He told us that he ate a normal Thai diet, which we described as somtam, kai pla, and these are a lot of, we'll say, not particularly well-cooked fish-related, crustacean-related dishes. Lots of rice. He feels well. Came in because he's getting yellowing of the skin and yellowing of the whites of his eyes. We described as jaundiced. He had previously been healthy with no prior medical problems or surgeries. No diseases he reports that ran in the family. He's a fisherman. He works as a fisherman in a freshwater area. He's married, has many children, but no extramarital sexual interactions, and he is known to be HIV negative. He lives in a jungle area. He lives by the river where he does a lot of fishing. Many dogs, chickens, monkeys, goats, cows, pigs. He uses the outdoors as a place to relieve himself. He does not report fever, but he's very thin, and he has distension. His belly is becoming large, and this has been going on for several months. It's only getting larger. And when we examine him, we saw that he is indeed jaundiced. He is yellowed throughout, including his eyes. He has a large, palpable, non-tender mass below his liver on the right side. I think it's referred to as the Courvoisier's sign, just for our friend who came back here from France. There's no enlargement of the liver or spleen, and no travel outside this area where he lived, other than his immediate travel down to Bangkok to be diagnosed and hopefully treated.
I noticed that I wrote in the notes last time, bathroom is outside. Of course, Daniel said it correctly, because if you go outside, it's not a bathroom, right?
It is called the outside.
The world is my bathroom.
That's right. By Daniel Griffin.
It's a good book.
Not bad. That's called the outhouse.
All right, we had some case guesses from David, dear TWiP Trio, although my guess from last week was incorrect. I always enjoy learning about a new parasitic disease I have never encountered in my studies. That being said, my guess for this week's parasitic puzzle. I like that. Seems to be related to last week's guess, but with a little uncertainty attached to it. Symptoms missing from last week's case seem to be present here. Jaundice, abdominal distension, mass below liver on the right-hand side near the biliary duct. These and Dr. Griffin's hint seem to point to either opisthorchiasis caused by Opisthorchis viverini or clonorchiasis caused by Clonorchis sinensis. Both infections are extremely similar in their pathology and life cycles and must be identified via egg microscopy. Both infections fall under the Oriental liver fluke, so I will use them interchangeably, but Opisthorchis viverini is common in Thai dishes, so I will venture that this is the organism involved. Thank you once again for the informative podcasts. David P. It is funny that he says it's common in Thai dishes. I'll have a little Opisthorchis in my...
I've been to Thailand 3 times already. I haven't encountered this, unfortunately.
Fortunately, Dickson.
Very fortunately.
Daniel,
we're not sure it was
Daniel,
in the dishes.
Take the next one, Daniel.
Bryce writes, hello, parasite prophets.
Good.
I would like to take a stab at the previous week's TWiP case about the man in northern Thailand. This is my first case study, but hopefully not my last. After a short patrol through PubMed, I believe this man is infected with Opisthorchis viverini. I'm very glad this is a submission in email format, since I have no idea how to get my tongue around that word. I was thinking flukes from the jaundice, which would be representative of destruction of the liver. Prior to some of the clues dropped, I would probably have guessed the magnificent Fasciola hepatica. The bile duct and raw fish dish hints narrowed my search when I came up with O. viverini, which also has been associated with a cancer of the gallbladder, or its ducts that could explain the large, non-tender mass in the abdomen. Additionally, it seems that this parasite is frequently found in northern Thailand, giving it the common name of the Southeast Asian liver fluke, a misnomer. Like Dr. Griffin, I would definitely try the raw fish dishes and hopefully not acquire any parasites. Here's to a future culinary experience free from flukes, tapeworms, or trichuris. Best, Bryce.
Dickson.
Writes, Dear Twippers, my guess is the Thai fisherman probably had liver fluke infection, Ophiuchthorchis viverini. He probably had it for quite some time without knowing, and now he is developing the cancer of the bile duct, and it is blocking the flow of bile. This is the reason he is having jaundice. If we look at the stool sample, we should find the parasite ova that look like old-fashioned light bulbs. Treatment, praziquantel, and removal of the tumor by surgery. Let me say something about Thai food. Som tum, or spicy papaya salad. The word som means sour taste from lime juice plus tomato. Tum means crushing the food with a mortar and pestle. Basically, tom sum is a spicy papaya salad made from raw papaya, tomato, garlic, chilies, dried peanuts, green beans, palm sugar, and lime juice. Everything is mixed in the mortar and crushed briefly with a pestle. It is healthy food, and everyone can enjoy this dish without having stomach upset. By adding extra ingredients, you can create many versions of som tum, depending on how adventurous you want to be. For example, som tum Thai is the basic papaya salad plus sun-dried shrimp. I would say that this version is quite safe to eat. Som tum pa ra is papaya salad plus raw fermented fish. Som tum pu kem is papaya salad plus raw salted freshwater crab. Another item of misunderstanding, fish sauce, or nam pla, not to be confused with fermented raw fish or pla ra. Fish sauce is made from small marine fish, for example, Stolanophorus species or anchovy. This is done by mixing the fish with salt, NaCl, about 50-50 ratio without adding water. Put the slurry in a big clay pot and let it sit for 1 year. Sure that isn't 9 months? Well, that's okay. Halophilic bacteria, such as Tetragenococcus species, will grow and digest the fish with proteolytic enzymes. The result is a clear amber liquid. Local people use it as it is. The modern manufacturer usually boils and filters it and then packs it into the bottle, so it is quite safe. I guess the Romans do have a similar thing called garum. Fermented raw fish, or pla ra, is made from freshwater fishes. It is done by mixing the fish with rice grain, rice bran, and a bit of salt, 10 to 20%, and then it is fermented anaerobically for a few months. The bacteria responsible for curing the fish are mostly lactic acid bacteria. The cured fish can be eaten raw or cooked, i.e. fried. I guess you can think of it as the Oriental pickled herring. Knowing this fact, next time you visit a Thai restaurant, you can start your gastronomical adventure. Keep up the good work and be nice to Dickson. Yeah, I would emphasize that last point.
You want us to be nice to you, Dickson?
I do. Paratakul, Bangkok, Thailand. P.S. I wish that TWiM and TWiV have case studies like this. It is currently 28 degrees Celsius and raining in Bangkok. By the way, we do get Curiosity Stream here in Thailand.
Cool.
Nice.
All right. Mike.
Quite a nice email.
Very nice. Well, next time either of you go to Thailand, now you can understand that slurry is a year sitting in a pot.
Yeah, I've been 3 times and never knew all of that information. I wish I had known that before I went.
Isn't it amazing that we have a listener in Thailand?
It is. It's quite pleasing,
that
actually.
He or she is. Do you know what kind of name that would be, Daniel? Probably not, right?
I don't, actually.
But anyway, they're interactive, which is great. Mike writes, Case 116, it could be Ophiuchthorchis viverini, common name, Southeast Asian liver fluke. But hey, what do I know? I'm just a peon trying to survive in the great multimedia empire of Lord Chrislip.
What does that? You have to fill me in. I'm missing.
Yeah, I missed that.
So, Mark Chrislip is an infectious diseases physician in Portland, Oregon, and he has a podcast and a book and a website.
All right.
His podcast is called the Infectious Diseases Puscast.
Oh, I've heard of the Puscast, yes.
It's a half-hour review of the literature. He just does it on his own, and he picks a couple of papers, and more than a couple. He goes through quite a few every other week, I think. I used to listen to it.
Huh.
All right. He's trying to survive in the great multimedia. Well, you can learn a lot from them, and we have a different thing going here.
Yeah.
Daniel.
Yosef writes, Dear TWiP team, I apologize for the capitalized OVA from the last email. Ova. I think I mixed up ova as in eggs and OVA, as in original video animation. I do write these in a rush, and I sometimes don't proofread well enough. I will try to do better.
You've done fine.
It's okay.
You've done fine.
You're just having a laugh, right?
All right. My differential for this case would be 1, echinococcus infection. When I think of a mass of the liver, I generally jump to either cancer or this worm causing a cyst. Thailand is not endemic for echinococcus, but I was able to find several cases from the past few years. If the cyst becomes large enough, then it could occlude the biliary tree, which then leads to the obstructive jaundice and our patient's symptoms. Treatment would be PAIR, puncture, aspiration, injection, and reaspiration. Number 2, schistosomiasis. It's fairly unlikely in this patient. Thailand, 1, is not endemic for schistosomiasis, but if the patient was in the very northeast portion of the country and came in contact with fresh water from Vietnam, where it is endemic, then I guess it could not be ruled out. I would not expect a mass developing with schistosomiasis. But I would assume that the fibrosis in the liver that results with chronic infection could predispose someone to develop hepatocellular carcinoma. But once again, this is assuming quite a lot, and so this is not high on my differential. Treatment would be praziquantel. 3, Opisthochus viverini. We are taught that painless jaundice is always concerning for cancer. In this patient, I don't see why a pancreatic cancer would form, but a cholangiocarcinoma is absolutely a significant problem in Thailand. Chronic infection with Opisthochus is usually asymptomatic, but the chronic inflammation can predispose one to a cholangiocarcinoma. If it spread to the liver, I would imagine that it could lead to the mass that is felt on physical exam. The jaundice could be a result of obstruction of the biliary tree, which is especially common if this is a Klatskin tumor. This points against this diagnosis in that this has been going on for months, and cholangiocarcinoma is notoriously for fairly rapid progression and death. 36 years is also still a bit young for this diagnosis. The biggest point for this diagnosis is the fact that Opisthochus is endemic to northern Thailand, and a large proportion of people are infected. Treatment would be praziquantel and surgery, most likely palliative for the tumor. Considering these diagnoses, I would ultrasound the patient's mass. It is cheap and safe if available. This should easily identify a fluid-filled cyst versus something else. If the mass is not fluid-filled, then a CT scan may be needed, especially if we think this is cancer, in order to determine if there are masses elsewhere. Sincerely, Yosef Davidoff. P.S. I recall in TWiP there was a discussion of post-cholecystectomy fat absorption. Without a gallbladder, the liver is constantly secreting bile salts into the duodenum. Or duodenum. What do we do?
Duodenum.
Into the duodenum.
Yes.
So fat is still digested properly.
Correct.
If someone has diarrhea after a cholecystectomy, it is more likely due to bile salt malabsorption, since without fat, the bile salts cannot be reabsorbed properly and can lead to a secretory diarrhea. As to the question of whether or not cholecystectomy affects norovirus infection, I would assume, based on these observations, that it would not affect infection rates. Sorry for putting this here, but it seemed appropriate with all the talk about the biliary tree.
No, it's fine. But what about if you don't have a colon, Yosef? Would you still get norovirus, gastroenterovirus? Would you still get rotavirus? So we talked about last time.
Interesting. You wouldn't get trichuris, I know that, because that's where it lives.
Large bowel.
Or would you get entomoeba histolytica?
Yeah, okay. So there's a positive for having
all kinds of good things.
Yeah.
Now, Daniel, that was the last one. We don't have too many this week.
I had a gentleman this morning that just got admitted who has no colon. So, I'll have to
Does he have
track.
a comma?
No, neither.
I wanted to ask you now, a differential.
Yes.
Purpose of that is when you have a patient with symptoms, you say these are the possibilities, and then the idea is that you would then design diagnostic tests to differentiate among them. Is that right?
There's several, and I think that's a good recap of it. There's several reasons we created differential. One is we want to know what diagnostic tests
to run.
Okay. But the second, we also want to get a sense: is there anything we need to be doing right away, just in case? If it's, let's say, there's a 10% chance someone has something that will kill them by tomorrow, we may start treating if we're not going to know the answer by tomorrow. So it helps us both with trying to figure out what diagnostic tests to do, but also letting us know if there's any empiric treatment that we might want to start while we're waiting for those results.
That's right. But he had no urgent symptomatology, as they would say. That is to say, he's had this as a chronic problem for a long time. So to know how to proceed, I don't know if I can butt in right now, but
now's a good time for you to jump in. So
if I were in charge of this patient, the first thing I would want to do is, after I palpated it and found out it was painless, because if it was painful, then this sort of hints at something else. I would then be suspicious of an amoebiasis lesion in the liver, an abscess, which is painful, by the way, and which can communicate through the diaphragm up into the lungs, and then it can get very dangerous very fast. So that's an acute problem, but people usually come in with that as an acute symptom. So this guy has been having this ongoing for lots of time, apparently. So then the CT scan would be next. Indeed, you look for fluid-filled versus non-fluid-filled cysts, and that sort of bifurcates the diagnosis off into these two groups, and that's what I would do next. But I don't know. What did you do next?
So you would like imaging?
I would love to see.
Okay. What are you thinking about? What is high on your?
When I heard you give this case, the first thing that popped into my mind was Echinococcus granulosus, because you said not only is he eating raw fish and hanging out with all of his mates at the local restaurants and everything else, but where he works, it's got lots of animals running around, chickens, dogs, and that raised the red flag for me. Dogs carry Echinococcus as an adult worm in their gut tract. So I would think that, and he's eating raw things, like the last case that we had that ate jumping salad. I mean, you're taking your life in your own hands when you do these things, by the way. So I think my tentative diagnosis, without knowing anything about the imaging or the diagnostic test that would definitively rule this in, is Echinococcus granulosus.
As Yosef said, though, it's pretty rare in Thailand.
That's okay.
It's all right.
Not a problem.
Daniel is known for rare diseases.
Yes, he is.
What are you thinking, Vincent? You read all these bright people.
I thought of Echinococcus, but I also thought of Opus thorcus,
That was hard to actually rule that in because of the swelling associated. And the swelling usually, in that case, if it's a blockage, then it's going to be painful.
Right. It's not.
So it's not painful. You have to rule that in. It's not.
So we had 1, 2, 3, 4 Opus thorcus and 1 Echinococcus or schistosome or Opus thorcus.
Yeah, the schistosomes I've never heard of that happening. I think hepatosplenomegaly is very, very common with schistosomiasis. In this case, it would be Schistosoma mekongi in the Mekong River.
Okay.
So I'm going to add you a little because, this is, I'll say something I pride myself in is my physical exam or the physical exam. Because the physical exam is going to help you. It's so we're describing this mass, and the question really comes down to is where is this mass and what is this mass? Right. And I think imaging is a reasonable thing to request. So the mass is actually truly inferior to the liver.
Right.
It's actually a large gallbladder. This is a enlarged distended gallbladder, which, as we mentioned, it's non-tender. So this is not developed acutely. This is developed over time. So now we have a Thai fisherman with a large distended gallbladder. What does that make you think?
Well, that then changes everything, of course. I mean, it rules it rules out the Echinococcus diagnosis, and then it rules back in a massive infestation, if they would call it that, but I'm sure it would be an infection of either Clonorchis or Opus thorcus.
Okay.
Just blocking the bile duct.
Yeah.
And that could lead to jaundice, obviously.
Yeah, but I like these differences. I like the people are thinking, because initially when you have a mass there, and particularly if there was maybe a different relationship with dogs, a lot of people in parts of the world distance themselves a little more from the dogs. I think we had an Echinococcus case with the woman from Bangladesh that we presented, where, the dogs are coming into the house, they're helping with the sheep, they're, giving each other kisses, right? The people do that here in the U.S. Sure. A lot of parts of the world, and I don't know if I told the story, but I was in an airport I think it was in India, and they had these petting dogs, these beautiful golden retrievers, and they were there for the travelers to come over and pet them and help them relax. And everybody, huge, wide girth, because, the rabies issue. They're like, dogs, I'm not going to get near dogs. Well, and actually, the family that I was seeing this morning, the lady was just admitted, I brought up dogs. They're like, no, no dogs. We want nothing to do with dogs. There's parts of the world where dogs are, they're viewed as potentially something that will give you rabies.
If you go to Bhutan, and I've been there once with my wife, we've never seen so many dogs in our lives. Running the streets, they're all interactive with people. Nobody owns them. And at night, they're incredibly loud. I mean, they bark all night long.
What do they want? Why are they barking?
I think they're hungry. And I think at night, the weakest dogs...
They get attacked?
Yeah, they do.
But eaten by the others.
Yeah, that's correct. So it's a dog-eat-dog world.
All right.
Daniel, did you have a differential for this originally?
I think, our man from Thailand, this, when you focus on the fact that he's eating, all the foods that people eat, he's from an area with a high endemicity for a certain parasite here. It's the gallbladder that is now enlarged.
Yeah, if you had said that to begin with, I would have never thought of it kind of concept.
It's really more of a, so can we confirm what we think this is by looking at a stool exam for eggs?
Mm-hmm.
And so we ordered, let's see what we ordered here. We ordered an original video animation.
Right.
An OVA, a stool parasite, an original video animation. And they, and what did they see? But they saw these... They saw these characteristic eggs. And let me ask you, you worked in the parasite lab for a long time.
Sure did.
So this is actually a case of Opisthochus viverrini. Okay. But as far as telling the eggs apart from Opisthochus viverrini, which is in this area, from Clinorchus sinensis.
Very difficult. In fact, you can't do it that way. You have to actually have the adult worms, and then you can tell them apart. But the eggs themselves are so close. One of them has a little button, like the distension at the top of the egg, at the opposite end of the operculum. The operculum is a little movable cover that keeps the miracidium, the infectious stage for the snail, inside the egg. And so one of them has a button, and the other one doesn't. One of them has a little flared lip before the operculum, the other one doesn't. It's very difficult. When you line them up next to each other, you can tell them apart. But if you only see one, you don't know which one it is because you don't have the other one there for comparison. So if it's not a mixed infection and you haven't got these two kinds of eggs coming out at the same time, they're both identical in size and in general shape. So the answer is no, we couldn't tell it apart on that level. I think the treatment is the same no matter which is there.
It is. Yeah,
but still, it would be nice to know which is which. So I guess PCR, who knows?
Yeah. Well.
Yes, the treatment is fortunately similar. So you don't, and they do surveys so you have a sense of what's in your region, and Opisthochus viverrini is very common in certain areas.
Sure. So why wasn't there any pain associated with this enlarged gallbladder? Because if you have gallstones, you can have a lot of pain because you're passing particulates down the gallbladder tube, right? Down the common duct, which is that's not happening here.
What is blocking the gallbladder in this case?
So I think I think the infection is actually there, and I think the reason it's painless is you have this massive infection, and it's developing slowly over time. So rather than having that colicky pain that we get, like when someone might think like, oh, I had gallstones. I remember that horrible pain as it tried to contract, the gallbladder tried to contract against a blockage, and that distension causes a horrible pain. I think this is such a slow, gradual accumulation. That's why we're seeing this.
So is there a risk of this bursting?
I don't think there's a large risk. And I think, again, the way this develops, so if anything, you might get scarring or something around it. But there is, what our people brought up, is there is an association with cancer and these fluke infections. But again, that's long term. That's decades down the line.
What did you treat him with?
He was treated with praziquantel, which really, it brings me to an interesting issue. So you have choices, right? You can use praziquantel, you can use albendazole. It's amazing when you look at the prices of those medications if you tried to give them here in the United States. Right. I mean, it's like $200 for an albendazole pill in the U.S. I just checked this recently. And praziquantel is like even more. And it's amazing because here are medicines that are really key medicines that are being used in the tropics, but here in the States, the prices are exorbitant.
Why is that?
We don't have those infections here.
But why are they so expensive then?
Because you have to make your money somehow. So per dose, you're still making the money.
But don't the same companies sell them overseas?
Well, there's there's a program, though, isn't there, Daniel, that actually makes these drugs more available to the countries that actually need them the most. So I think
but these are not,
ivermectin, for instance, is a pretty expensive drug, but in some countries it's free.
It's not like these are new. All the development costs are recovered already.
No, but I know that's never the case here.
They never reduce prices.
Exactly right.
And did he recover, and did the mass go away, or is
he recovered and did quite well?
Yeah,
and this is not uncommon, this story.
And the jaundice left, right?
And the jaundice went away.
Okay. And the gallbladder returned to normal.
The gallbladder got smaller. I don't know if it ever got to normal size, but it did diminish in size.
Were you ever tempted to go in and remove the gallbladder?
No.
Okay.
If untreated, would this have killed him?
With the way it was headed, and he was doing poorly and losing weight, and I'm not sure, but I worry that it may have.
So there are a lot of these infections in Thailand because of eating fish. Dickson, can you review for us the life cycle of Opisthochus?
Oh, sure. It's a common fluke, like we said, in certain parts of the world, and they follow a common pattern of almost all of the flukes. There isn't one fluke that I know of that doesn't have a snail intermediate host.
That affects humans, because we
sure.
There are 2 fluke exceptions somewhere in the world, but they're not human infections.
Right.
So
we're only talking about human fluke infections, and that includes the schistosomes as well. They require freshwater snails as intermediate hosts. And they also, some of them, not all of them, require paratenic hosts. Okay, so for instance, Fasciola hepatica, which is the largest and best known of the liver flukes, their egg hatches in fresh water. The miracidium, the ciliated stage inside, swims around, and it looks and seeks out via the chemical trail that the snail leaves, the intermediate host, the snail. It penetrates the foot of the snail, goes to the hepatopancreas, which is a common organ that does both the pancreatic and hepatic things that ours have separated via evolution into different organs. And then it proceeds to reproduce. And it produces sicariae, okay? And these sicariae then penetrate out of the snail. And in the case of the schistosomes, it seeks out people by these trails of chemicals that we leave in the water as we swim or wade. But for most of the flukes, they insist on inanimate objects. So the sicaria will swim to something like, in this case, watercress. And that's the inanimate host, if you wish, to think of it this way, that the Fasciola hepatica insists upon around the edge of these ponds, freshwater ponds, the littoral zone of the pond, the ecological.
You just wanted to say littoral.
I did. And I love the word. It means the edge of a freshwater body of water. And then the sheep come along and feed on the watercress that's growing along the edge of the water. And then they acquire the fluke via these metasicaria, which are encysted on the vegetation. By the way, people eat watercress too, and we eat watercress sandwiches.
Yes.
In certain places, it's very fashionable. And occasionally, people of nobility and of high economic status come down with a liver fluke, and they wonder, how in the world could I have possibly encountered this? And it's common throughout the British Isles and in New Zealand, in Australia, and in Ireland. Those places that raise a lot of sheep and have a lot of watercress have a lot of liver fluke problem. Okay, so back to Opisthochus. Opisthochus viverini and Clonorchus sinensis, instead of using littoral vegetation, they use, and this is another word I like to use, cyprinoid fish.
You do like that, yes.
Cyprinoid. Yeah,
so cyprinoid fish are carp. They're related to carp, and they're freshwater, and they're raised in mass for large consumption, large population consumption. They're fish farmed, basically. It's an aquaculture. So you can imagine how easy it would be to have someone who defecates regularly in the outdoors to seed the area, so to speak, with the eggs, then hatch and go into the snails, and then the snails release the sicaria, and the sicaria swim until they encounter one of these fish, and they go underneath a scale, and then they insist into the metasicaria. So now you'll say, well, how the heck could I possibly catch this infection then? Because I don't eat scales of fish.
Right.
Okay. However, when these fish are then slaughtered and processed and turned into these dishes that employ raw fish dishes, these parasites have an easy time getting from host to host, definitive host to definitive host. The other parasites similar to this, which we've discussed before, I think once, was Paragonomus. The Paragonomus is a lung fluke, and instead of insisting on fish, this parasite insists on crabs, freshwater crabs. And the freshwater crab is then eaten either alive in some cases, or they call it drunken crab. They will submerge the crab in some alcohol to sort of slow it down.
Crab, right.
And then they'll just crack it open with their teeth and suck out the juices and meat from the inside. But in doing so, they encounter the metastatic of that particular fluke, and therefore, there you go. But there's a very interesting habit in certain areas of China and Southeast Asia where women, particularly, are hired to take water chestnuts and to bite off the husk and revealing the inside portion, which is an edible portion. And some of these flukes insist on the water chestnut just on the outside. Yeah. And the women in charge of husking water chestnuts have massive infections with these parasites because they're encountering them all the time.
Don't use a knife.
You might cut your fingers off then. I don't know. It's a tradition. These are traditional farming practices that have been in place for centuries, I'm sure. So
couldn't find any episodes. I know we did liver flukes.
I know we did. In the beginning, we had it in our basic parasitology sessions. It's got to be there someplace.
I know. I know.
You know what? If it's not there, darn it, we're going to add it.
Well, I remember using.
Maybe you did fasciola, but did you do Clonorchus or
Paragonomus?
Fasciola. Let me just search for fasciola because that might have been the one we did. I remember the picture. It was a very striking picture of it.
Right. But I'll bring up one of the important life cycle differences between fasciola and the Clonorchus and the Opisthochus is how they get to the biliary system, right? I mean, and that is really an interesting thing.
I didn't talk about that at all.
But the fasciola is actually going to basically tunnel through the liver, and I think we had a case where we talked about it, and you see these track marks through the liver till it finally gets to the biliary duct. Where here, maybe you say this is a smarter fluke; it just goes right up the biliary trach.
So hang on a second. How do you acquire fasciola hepatica? You eat watercress, right?
Yes.
So the stage that is on the watercress, the metastatic, which gives rise to the adult, is ingested. So it goes into your stomach, right? And then it is released from its cyst, and then it goes to the small intestine. And then what happens?
And then it enters through the small intestine. Oh, tell me.
This is even more intriguing. More intriguing. It actually penetrates the small intestinal wall, and it crawls until it reaches the Glisson's capsule, which encompasses the liver, and it penetrates directly through the liver, and that's how it gets to the...
That is true. Right through the bowel wall.
So that's crazy. That's crazy.
And then once in the liver, parenchyma, then it wanders around.
Look at him.
Wanders around.
It is something that we refer to in the textbook that we just finished revising as foie gras d'homme.
Yeah, I left that in.
Oh, good.
I found
the other
found it. 27. It was called trematodes.
Terrific.
We did a bunch of them.
Okay, so Opisthochus and Clonorchus, in contrast, when they're swallowed in raw fish, and then they hatch, they actually stay in the small intestine and crawl up through the bile duct.
Aren't you gonna talk about the ampulla of Vater and the sphincter of Oddi? The terminology. It was right there. That was your opportunity.
Ampulla of Vater isn't that the one that goes to the pancreas, though, right?
Well, they come together actually. So the pancreatic and biliary duct come together, and they form a short segment that is common.
Okay.
And there's actually a little ampulle there, and there's a sphincter, and that's where the common ducts actually meet the duodenum. And so they actually penetrate through.
Duodenum, as the case.
Exactly. And actually they go right through the sphincter of Oddi, and they go right through that ampulla, and then they actually migrate up in. So I guess you could imagine an aberrant migration where they end up going towards the pancreas. But
I think they're following chemical trails.
Yeah, fortunately they're going, because that would be pretty devastating.
I'll say.
Right? Because once the problem with that is if you block and create high pressure inside the pancreas, then you activate pancreatic enzymes while they're still in the pancreas. So that would be more disastrous.
Really a very difficult problem to deal with. So these are unusual organisms in many ways. And by the way, if the listeners think that, just avoiding these two food items would make me safe from the other fluke problems that might exist out there, you should see how many different kinds of flukes there are actually that we haven't even discussed.
So it's not just a fluke.
There are many, many, hundreds perhaps, of different flukes which are zoonotic, but which can also infect people.
We have them here in the U.S.?
No.
Why not?
Because we don't have the snail intermediate hosts.
Well, let's
and
bring
we have
some
a
snails
high degree of sanitation.
Don't snails live in American streams?
But there's species specificity, fortunately.
How many different kind of snails do you think there are out there?
2 or 3.
Try 2 or 3,000.
I thought there was 4. No, there's 1,000.
Right. And what do you call someone who studies snails?
Snailologists.
No, you call them malacologists.
Malacologists?
They call them malacologists. That's right. And there are very few of them in the world. But look at how important it is to know which snail species is involved. So there are many, many zoonotic infections throughout Southeast Asia and South Asia and China, which human beings can come in contact with and catch, in addition to cats, dogs, and other feral animals. So just know that what you're dealing with here is a tip of an iceberg.
Got it.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Wow,
Thank
this
you,
was
Daniel.
exciting.
Thank you, Daniel.
Well, I hope people enjoyed
Lovely.
that.
No, this was great.
Lovely.
And you know who got it right away was our gentleman from Thailand, because I always say that people who are from the area,
they know best.
They actually know what's going on, right?
They do. And yet they continue to eat the fish dishes.
And they get infected. How many cases
But as
a year
we pointed
in
out,
Thailand?
they taste so good.
Yeah.
Oh, thousands, yeah.
Thousands.
Is there
certain areas they estimate 80% of the population has been infected. So it's really.
And they keep reseeding the waters with eggs, right?
That's what.
So if
creates
you
the
were a
cycle
public
going.
health official in Thailand and you knew that this was a national dish,
Put in
is there some way that you could interfere with the life cycle and still keep the dish tasting the same?
install toilets.
No, well,
Well,
that would be one,
would be
of
one
course.
Yeah, because when you go outdoors,
Yeah,
And then the
that's
dishes
true.
would even taste better.
Could you do something to the food, though, that would sterilize it and still make it taste good?
cook it.
Like pasteurize it or something.
Well, then that destroys the raw fish taste.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It's like sushi. You can cook it. It's not sushi anymore.
Exactly. Well, sushi is not, that doesn't mean raw fish.
What does it mean?
No, it's a style of presenting.
Yeah, that's true.
Sushi doesn't mean raw because there are a lot of cooked dishes. in
Well,
sushi.
So you
Did I
couldn't have
say it meant
nigiri.
raw?
You couldn't have
did,
nigiri
you did.
sushi.
Actually, it says a type of food preparation in Japan with raw fish.
Well, that's not broad enough a definition there because you know darn well that you can have certain cooked fish as part
Well, you know
of
what I
sushi.
meant anyway.
We do.
If you cook the raw fish in sushi,
They're going to have to start writing in "Be nice to Vincent." If you keep
no,
that
it's
fixed.
okay. No.
I'm trying to be gentle here.
He doesn't know how to be because never mind.
I haven't got a mean bone in my body.
No, to be mean, you have to know something.
Oh, I see.
Just kidding.
Does that do it?
No. I understand, but I meant simply the cooking of something same thing with that French meat dish. What is that called? Beef bourguignon? No. What's the raw beef?
Tartare.
Tartare. If you cook it, it's not tartare anymore.
This is
right?
all true, but you could freeze it. Remember, if you freeze it, it's okay.
If you freeze it, they will eat
they'll
it.
die. They'll die.
This episode is
will die.
brought to you by Curiosity Stream, the world's first ad-free nonfiction streaming service with over 1,500 titles and 600 hours of content, founded by John Hendricks of Discovery Channel. So you're going to get real science shows, the truth, not fiction,
Exactly.
not reality TV, which you can find elsewhere.
Real reality. This is real reality.
Available on many platforms like the web, Roku, Android, iOS, Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Kindle, Apple TV. Dickson, you have any of those things? You have the web, right?
I have the web.
You don't have any device for watching TV.
I have a TV.
Yeah, it's plugged into the cable, right?
I have a cable. Yep.
Yeah. Well, you could still watch it on your computer.
I have a cell phone.
You could watch on your cell phone.
Sure you could.
It's available in 196 countries. They have a lot of science and technology. They have nature history, interviews, lectures. They have things like Stephen Hawking's universe, tracing the history of astronomical theories and technology, deep time history, 3 parts on the 14 billion year history of the Earth, actually of the universe, not the Earth. Earth is only, 4 billion years old?
4.5, 4.9.
4.983.
But who's
that
counting?
Somebody, obviously, right?
According to carbon dating, that's how old.
Underwater Wonders of the National Parks. This is the 100th anniversary of the U.S. national parks.
Do you think they have this in North Korea?
No, I don't think so. They censor everything.
Yeah.
Have you been to a national park, Dickson?
Many times.
Have you been, Daniel?
I've been to a lot, and if people are in the New York area, the Museum of Natural History has a wonderful IMAX movie about the national parks, part of this celebration.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's here on Curiosity.
Public television had a whole series on the National Park Service.
Yeah, they're tremendous that was established.
Well, this
foresight.
This series takes you underneath the bodies of water in the national park. Quick, Dickson, name one national park with a body of water in it. In the U.S.
Yellowstone.
Has a body of water?
Are you kidding? It's got Yellowstone Lake, and it's a deep lake because it's a caldera.
Wow.
And they've got...
A caldera used to be a volcano?
That's correct.
Kind of still is.
But it's not...
Kind of still is.
Hoping it doesn't blow.
But it's not sushi, right?
That's not sushi.
And the first national park, Yosemite.
Was that
Thanks
Yosemite?
to John Muir and Roosevelt.
I would take exception
What do you
to
think?
You're going to
was the
take
first?
exception to that? Tell me.
I think
Tell me what
Yellowstone
you're gonna
Park
say.
is the first park.
Really?
Yellowstone.
Shall we Google?
Actually, it's
Shall we go
Jellystone.
Is it Jellystone?
Yellowstone Park is the first.
Yeah, do first national
First
park.
National Park.
Tell us the results while I finish up the
Okay.
Curiosity stream. Anyway.
Actually, Dickson is right.
Well, you
Is
know
it
why I know?
Jellystone?
Because
Why-
I've been
why do
there
you
so
know
many
that?
times.
You've been there so many times?
I do a lot of fishing out there, so it's a
They
wonderful
let you
place.
fish in the national park,
I do. You don't even need a license.
but you have to throw it back.
You have to throw them back. There's only one lake in Yellowstone National Park that you can actually keep the fish. And
Here's a question for you, Dickson.
Yeah, go ahead.
At Jellystone, they have a lot of hot water, bodies of water, right?
Yeah.
The hot springs
Yeah.
heated by volcanic activity under the earth.
Yeah.
Because they're so hot, are they sterile, Dickson?
Of course not. No,
Gotcha.
they're loaded, in fact.
How
They've
can
got
the bacteria
coming out of their yin-yang?
Oh my gosh, they can live at high temperatures?
Absolutely.
And you knew this?
Of course.
Where did you learn this, in grammar school?
No, I learned it by listening to a lecture from a guy by the name of Brock.
Thomas Brock, I have his textbook up there.
I heard him lecture.
He's the guy who discovered the
It was at Indiana
bacteria
University.
that live at high temperatures, and from them came Tac polymerase, Thermus aquaticus.
But where does that come from?
Thermus aquaticus.
Where does it come from?
Yellowstone, no?
No.
How do you know?
It comes from the deep vents.
No, I don't think so.
I think it does.
Thomas Brock studied it. He didn't study vents.
No, but the guy that runs New England Biolabs did. Tac polymerase, the one they use in...
I thought that came from Tom Brock's.
Nope. It comes from the deep vent. It comes from the tube worm.
Nope, it came from thermophilic bacteria
Maybe
in the lower
first.
Geyser Basin of Yellowstone
Okay.
National Park.
That was the first one, but now they're using one from
Yeah,
the tube.
no, but I'm talking about the first one. Don't try and
Oh,
squirm out of this, Dickson Despommier.
No, I knew the history because I heard Brock
This
lecture.
is a typical strategy of Dickson.
Wait, I need to squirm out because I screwed up. I gotta.
What did
No,
you-
I'm
the
seeing here.
Jellystone?
Apparently, Yosemite was protected in 1864, but then in 1872, Grant goes ahead and the national park makes Yellowstone. So the first actual national park, though Yosemite had been protected earlier,
Right.
but not a national park at that point.
Correct.
Enrich
No
your
wonder
life.
I got lost in that corn maze. That was one of the hints in the corn maze, and we went the wrong way and wandered aimlessly for half an hour because I thought I knew the correct answer.
Well, knowledge is like that. It leads you around to various places. That's for sure.
Yes.
Just like your case histories, I think they're great for that reason. It forces your mind to go in all directions.
I'm not done with Curiosity Stream.
Okay, back to Curiosity Stream. Sorry.
Some people don't like it but it's fine.
We're wondering.
Curiosity Stream. They also have high definition, ultra high definition, which is 4K. They have over 50 hours of content. Really, really, really sharp. And you can expand them to big pictures. Anyway, what size TV do you have, Dickson?
We've got a 48-inch plasma.
You need to do 80.
I haven't got a place for it.
Hang it out in the balcony. All right.
Start on a movie theater.
They have over 50 hours of 4K content. Monthly and annual plans are available. They start at $2.99 a month, less than a cup of coffee here at New York City or probably anywhere else in the world. Let's put it this way, any cup of coffee worth drinking. Or one title on another platform. check it out, curiositystream.com/microbe, and use the promo code microbe during your sign-up to get unlimited access to the world's top documentaries and nonfiction series completely free for the first 60 days. That's 2 entire months free of one of the largest nonfiction 4K libraries around. Just go to curiositystream.com/microbe and use the offer code microbe at sign up. We thank CuriosityStream for their support of TWiP. Don't you love it that they have the promo code microbe, Dickson?
I do.
It's kind of clever, isn't it?
It's plays into our whole scheme of things.
Yes.
Hopefully this is helping them, because this looks like some really
Going to get a TWiP.
Well, look,
stuff.
our friend in Thailand said they can get it there.
Yeah. And I've been trying to work it into conversations whenever my kids say something. I say, did you learn that on Curiosity Stream, that streaming service that offers over 1,500 documentaries?
Really, in high definition, too.
Yeah, ultra high definition.
That's incredible.
We have a paper that is going to be published in PLOS Pathogens actually tomorrow.
So it's embargoed.
It's embargoed. So, but we're talking about it in a closed room.
We are.
I have a press preview, and it's a wonderful paper. It's called Leishmania Virus-Dependent Metastatic Leishmaniasis is Prevented by Blocking IL-17A. And this first author is Mary Ann Hartley, and the last author is Nicholas Fazel. And buried in here is Stephen Beverly.
I know him very well.
And he is chair of microbiology
He's
at
a good
Washington University. Is he?
Hello, yeah, hello, Steve.
Is he a good person?
He's a wonderful person. And he's very musical. He plays a great guitar.
I met him once.
Yeah.
This comes from Washington University and also University of Lausanne, which is where, Dickson?
Sounds like it's in France someplace.
Switzerland.
Switzerland.
I thought I was handing you a softball.
Well,
then we have the
threw me a curve.
The Institut Pasteur in the French Guiana, and the World Health Organization Training Center in Épalinges, Switzerland.
Okay.
Cutaneous Leishmaniasis.
Yes.
Which, of course, we've talked about here on TWiP before many times.
Yes.
Apparently, 5% of humanity, that means 5% of all the people on Earth, right, have risk of cutaneous leishmaniasis across 98 countries worldwide.
That's amazing.
And this is actually becoming more extended because of climate change. Yep. So what spreads Leishmania, Dickson? Sand flies.
In the New World, it's Leishmania. And in the Old World, it's phlebotomus. So here in this paper, we deal with this infectious metastasis. So the vector bites you, you get a lesion there, but then sometime later you get lesions distal.
Mm-hmm.
Which
we can post a picture of one from our
textbook. No, let's not.
It's actually, it's curable. It's curable.
I'm just kidding. We've shown them before.
It's curable.
But they go to cutaneous locations.
They do.
Right.
They do.
Now, not mucocutaneous. No. That's another form, right?
That's right.
Just remind me, mucocutaneous.
That I'm going to I think this is great that you bring that up right away, is that 90% to 95% of leishmaniasis, we're talking about cutaneous now.
Right.
You're initially infected by let's say, Leishmania, that sandfly, and the Leishmania stays in a fairly localized region. But then 5 to 10%, it can arise elsewhere. And that can be other cutaneous or mucocutaneous sites.
And that's devastating, the mucocutaneous. It erodes.
The mucocutaneous is what's truly devastating. I've seen people where it's eroded, parts of their face. Because by parts of their face, we're talking about the soft palate, the septum.
Cartilage, mostly.
Yeah, I mean, and so you end up with these connections between both sides of the nose and the mouth.
That's not good. But they're caused by different species, though, yes?
Well, that's the interesting issue. I mean, and now there's been a topic so how do you predict who's going to have problems? So one, as Dickson points out, is knowing knowing which type of Leishmania. Is it Leishmania, for instance, Brasiliensis, notorious for these, metastatic spreads, versus, let's say a Peruviano or one of the ones that are really not characterized by this. But then always been the question that, is it something genetically different about the people? Or is it something special about the Leishmania, which we're going to learn about?
Exactly.
So these metastases can happen years after the initial infection, right?
Many years.
Yeah. Wow, that's scary. So the topic of this paper is a virus. Are we allowed to do this on TWiP, Dickson?
Absolutely.
It's a virus of a parasite.
Virus of a parasite.
parasite.
Parasite of a parasite. These are Leishmania Rna viruses. Do you know who discovered these? I bet you do. Didn't C.C. Wang discover them?
C.C. Wang discovered some of them, but this was discovered back in 1974.
Well, he wasn't born then? Is that why you said?
I mean, who was discovered by?
Of course he was.
Molyneux.
Molyneux. Anyway, these are double-stranded
Ask me
RNA
how I know
viruses.
that.
How do you know that?
Because I looked it up on Wikipedia.
Do you know how many different genome types there are among viruses?
7.
This is one of them. It's double-stranded RNA.
It is.
And we actually have talked about Leishmania virus before because this double-stranded RNA is sensed by host toll-like receptors.
Exactly.
And you get an innate immune response. You have cytokines produced. And this can exacerbate disease.
Do you remember the other protozoans that have double-stranded RNA?
Giardia.
And?
Toxoplasmas do. Trichomonas. Not toxo?
Yeah. No.
I bet you there's an RNA virus of toxo, though. Trichomonas, Giardia, and Leishmania.
Exactly.
What a rock band that would be. Or it could be a law firm.
Better as a law firm.
Do we
but a
cheat
collection
them and
agency.
how? Do we cheat them and how, right?
Do we cheat them and how? That's right.
So in mice, this virus, when the virus is present in the parasite, it makes disease worse. And the presence of the virus has been associated in people with treatment failure and mucosal manifestations. So what does it mean to be associated? You can't show causation,
That's
but
the doctor.
You just say, this person has worse disease and we get virus from them, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're going from correlation, hey, we see these two together to trying to actually get a mechanistic connection.
Yeah. Now, so in this paper, they're trying to figure out what's going on with this virus and spreading of Leishmania.
Right.
However, the mouse models are tough because the mice always heal, and there's, at least in C57 black mice, they don't get secondary lesions.
Right.
All right. So there's no model. There's no simple model to tease this out.
Nope.
So that's what they want to do in this paper, figure out what they're doing. And there's some clues that IL-17A, the cytokine, is involved. This is a pro-inflammatory cytokine which induces cell migration and activation and recruitment. And there's some evidence that whether you make IL-17 or not, 17A can make disease worse. So that's what they're looking at.
Yeah.
So initially they screened 78 adults in French Guiana, where I guess there are a lot of this.
It's endemic.
Cutaneous Leishmaniasis.
Yep.
And then they further divide them into two groups based on whether or not the Leishmania have the virus or not.
That's right.
So you have to take Leishmania from these patients, and then you look for the viral RNA. And all these people were HIV negative. Why would you want to be HIV negative, Daniel? Why is that important?
Very early in the epidemic, they noticed that there was a problem with the immunity in HIV patients and increased problems with leishmaniasis. So I think what they want to do is remove that sort of parameter, because obviously there's an issue with HIV infection.
Because they have huge immune problems, and you don't want that to complicate it. So the patients infected with Leishmania plus the virus had the largest proportion of chronic lesions. It's more than double that found in patients without the virus.
Yep.
However, as they say, they had a limited group size, so they don't know the statistical significance. But it certainly looks trending to me, doesn't it, Dickson?
I'd say.
As they would say. So then they say, let's look at IL-17A secretion. They do that by PCR. They take a biopsy of the lesion. And they look for IL-17 by PCR.
Right.
And the amount of IL-17 is generally higher in those with worse disease.
How about that?
So markedly higher in those with the
virus.
With the virus.
For sure, absolutely. In fact, if you have virus and IL-17, it really goes well with having more serious disease. They also look at lymphocytes from these patients, and they confirm that they produce higher levels of the patients with more serious disease produce higher levels of IL-17, especially in the virus-infected cohort. And it's CD4 positive T cells that are making this. So far, serious disease correlates with virus and IL-17.
Correct.
Would you agree with that, Dickson?
Well, the evidence does point in that general direction, doesn't it?
Right.
I mean,
So
this sounds
that's
like
a human study, right?
It's a human study.
And you can only observe. You can't
Of course.
perturb.
No.
Oh, listen, I made something.
We've encountered situations like this before with other microbial associations in larger organisms, namely Wolbachia in worms, contributing to the pathogenesis in that disease as well. So this seems to be a common theme in nature in general. Why would this favor the spread of the parasite?
Yep. And in that case, we mess. I mean, if we had maybe we'll get here, but at some point, if we had an antiviral effective against this Leishmania virus, we could potentially intervene.
That might work, yeah.
Half them get it, half don't. We see if there's any impact.
Wouldn't you be obliged to treat the Leishmania
well, we don't know.
infection?
You don't know.
Well, you are obliged to treat the Leishmania infection, but we're still seeing these problems. So if you treat the virus, is that going to be sufficient?
They could do both. Both groups get Leishmania treatment, and one gets antiviral on top of it. All right, so now they move to a mouse model. And they say if we infect mice with...
I think the interferon gamma, should we mention that too? You're also seeing a significant reduction in interferon gamma.
That's correct. The high IL-17A interferon gamma ratio.
And then we see a ratio.
So low gamma is also going along with severe disease in these patients.
Yeah, so you're failing to have that robust Th1 signature cytokine interferon gamma that we want.
Yep.
And you're getting this high IL-17A.
Yeah, well, that raises the question. Now, does interferon gamma interfere with viral replication inside the protozoan? There's got to be some evidence for that.
Well, I think we see that with the Black 57, a mouse with a robust Th1 is somehow better off relative to Leishmania. And here we're seeing a correlation between if you have the virus, which is associated with worse outcomes, you're seeing less of the signature Th1 cytokine.
So I'm curious as to whether it's interfering with the protozoan or the virus inside the protozoan.
It's a good question. They don't really look at it here, and they don't even mention studies, but it's a good question.
Yeah.
Because it could be doing either or both. Who knows, right? Yes, gamma is important.
Can you tell them apart because the virus is infecting the Leishmania?
Into the protozoans. I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Well, Dickson, can't you just put virus in medium without cells? Wouldn't they replicate?
Yeah, they're alive, so they should. I don't know what's wrong with that.
Okay, you're paying attention. That's good.
Right.
I learned that at the Donald Trump University.
They move into mice. And they inoculate mice in the hind foot pads.
Right.
With Leishmania that either have or do not have the Leishmania virus. And, they have, when you have the virus around, you get more significant lesions, more parasites, and an increase of IL-17A in biopsies of the lesion. So when you have the virus, you get more IL-17A than when you don't.
So it's important to point out that the foot pad,
and
the organism that you're injecting is not the amastigotes that you get after you are bitten by a sandfly, okay? But what you start off with are the promastigotes, which have a flagellum, and you can actually grow them in vitro at lower temperatures so that they imitate the conditions inside the sandfly. So, and also what you would find in the foot pad are drains to lymph nodes and dendritic cells. And I think those are the first cells that are attacked by the promastigotes. And when they round up, turn into amastigotes, that's when the infection starts.
Now, notice they're not looking at secondary lesions because that doesn't happen in mice.
Exactly.
And not yet anyway.
Exactly.
Yep.
Now, they next infect mice lacking the gene for toll-like receptor 3, which is known to sense this double-stranded RNA virus. And there, this enhancement by the virus is gone, because they can't sense the viral RNA and make a cytokine response. Make sense to you, Dickson?
Yeah, very much so.
Okay.
It means that the virus is getting loose from the protozoan somehow.
Yeah, it's getting sensed. You can, it must be,
it's not producing anything.
Yeah,
right?
Some protozoa are breaking open. It's probably spilling out. Yeah, that's right. Because normally our viral RNAs can be sensed intracellularly because viruses are infecting cells, right? But we're not talking about the Leishmania innate response here. We're talking about the host innate response.
Like a Russian doll
situation. So the RNA
but I think
has
it's important for our listeners to realize that Leishmania is an intracellular parasite.
It is.
So this is, we think
Correct.
of helminths and parasites are these big things outside, but this is actually much like a virus. It's inside the cell.
So if they're breaking and a little of RNA is getting out,
Right.
that will be sent. Now, also, they look at mice that can't make IL-17,
Yes.
and they have reduced lesions, etc., which you would expect. So far, it's consistent with their idea that IL-17 is important. They also have reduced parasite burden, and so IL-17 and both the virus. So sorry, IL-17 and the virus are both important for lesion size and parasite growth in mice.
Exactly. Just like Trichomonas, with its own virus, was important for inducing lesions in the cervix.
That's right.
So there's
Yes,
some
that's right.
parallels
Which
here.
we did
Remember?
on TWiP.
We did.
TWiP, is that the name
TWiP.
of the podcast?
That's another parasite entirely.
TWiP 128.
Yeah, we did that.
That's right. That was a good one.
That was excellent.
128. No, it can't be 128.
No, 'cause
We're not up to that.
We're only on 117.
I'll look it up.
Yeah, it's there.
We're
It's
only on
there
117.
It's there someplace.
So-
Unless we did some Back to the Future thing.
I don't remember,
Now-
but then again,
All right, so next,
But then you were older when we recorded
this
that
is
one.
all true. And
they look at interferon gamma deficient mice.
aha.
All right. Both virus positive and negative parasites can establish disease in the absence. However, between weeks 4 and 6, the infections with the virus have higher pathology and parasite burden compared to virus negative Leishmania in interferon gamma negative mice. And the cool part is they develop metastases on the tail and sometimes the forepaws or the snout. So you take away interferon gamma and now you get metastases. What do you think about that? You're taking your glasses off. That must mean you're going to say something
light bulb went
profound.
on. No, I wanted to just raise an issue, and that is for the human disease, is there a trend in some regions, isolated geographically, for this to actually take over from the strain of Leishmania that doesn't have a virus in it? Because it appears that the more the lesions, the better the chances for the sandflies to pick it up.
Yeah, sure.
So you should
That
have
that's
more
a-
and more and more. And I wondered if they've seen these trends in
It's a selective force.
these epidemiological areas.
It may be in the literature.
Just a question.
I think it's a good question. You want to look it
No,
up?
but you're
or-
right. I mean, that's where the sandflies are acquiring it. There's
Sure. Right at the
there's
edge of the
there's an
lung.
ulcer,
That's right.
and then there's an edge, and actually the infection spreads, and it's in that tissue, going for several centimeters, inches, depending on.
And they're painless lesions for the most part. There's no pain associated with these
Yeah.
things, and that's curious because they look awful.
They look awful, yes.
But
they do.
the patient doesn't experience the pain associated with what you would expect to have for a lesion of that size.
So, you take away interferon gamma,
Right.
you now get a metastasis,
You do.
which actually happens both in the presence and absence of the virus, but it's much faster when the virus is present inside the Leishmania. So they now have a model for metastasis.
Yeah.
Leishmania metastasis.
Good stuff.
So what's going on here? It's been previously shown that interferon gamma is actually inhibitory to secretion of IL-17A.
Ah.
So that would
my goodness.
so if IL-17A is potentiating disease somehow, especially with virus-infected Leishmania, then and interferon gamma, we're showing the higher the gamma, the better prognosis. Maybe it's actually directly interfering with IL-17A.
Very cool.
Mhm.
And in fact, they find that in their mice during infections that 17 is increased in the absence of interferon gamma. That's in the interferon gamma knockout mice.
Right.
They have a lot of IL-17A.
Right.
And when you infect these mice, you get a lot of induction. So
All seems to fit.
it's consistent with it. Doesn't prove it,
That's
but it is consistent
You're
with it.
absolutely right.
Now, finally, they make interferon gamma IL-17A null mice, lacking the gene for both. Double knockout mice, DKO, Dickson.
DKO.
And a triple knockout would be TKO.
TKO.
And a quadruple knockout. This is easy. You're a smart guy.
Q. Quay.
They infect them. They have reduced infection with either virus positive or negative parasites.
Right.
And they rarely develop metastases.
There you go.
So,
Rarely or never?
rarely.
So I would worry about the rarely.
It's rarely.
Yeah,
It's
they
not
have some.
never, It's
So
rarely.
why?
It's a reduction.
Why isn't it all or nothing?
Maybe
biology
this
is anything.
maybe this isn't
nothing?
the whole story.
Maybe.
Thank you.
Maybe something else is going
Maybe
on.
this is not the whole story. Yeah, that maybe there's confounding
Are there
factors.
an infinite number of factors, Dickson?
I hope not. Not infinite.
All right, now they're thinking maybe we could target IL-17A to treat metastasis, right? Or to prevent it. So there's a drug, digoxin. Let's have Daniel tell us what digoxin is. Do you use this for anything else?
Yeah.
We do. And this is one of those first drugs they love to teach you in medical school. The whole history of foxglove, and they show you the plant and they tell you the history. And it was introduced for a disease called dropsy. Everyone ever heard of dropsy?
I've heard of it, but I've never seen it.
Yeah, and you run across it in literature. It's always funny.
You know, the
dropsy.
New York Mets have that disease.
Do they have dropsy?
They do have dropsy.
Yes.
I wouldn't know. I'm not.
But only in the
a
outfield.
baseball
The
fan.
infielders are okay, but the outfielders all have
Suffering
dropsy.
from dropsy. Well, dropsy we now call congestive heart failure, which has got a horrible name, right? People are I have heart failure. It sounds like you will be dead within the week because my heart is failing. So it's been used for a really long time. It's also used. People have atrial fibrillation, where the heart's the top part of the heart is fibrillating, and then the bottom part of the heart can often be going rather quickly. And digoxin through the vagus nerve can actually rate control.
Okay.
So there's a few uses for
Nature's
digoxin.
pacemaker.
I think it's been in like some mysteries where they dose people with digoxin and the world appears like yellowish. There's a yellow color
Well,
to the
it
world.
turns out that it also inhibits the production of IL-17A.
Look good.
How
at that.
convenient, right?
Good thought.
So now they can infect their mice with Leishmania and treat them with digoxin or not. And what they find is that the drug reduces the lesional swelling. It reduces parasite burden to levels that you find in IL-17 null mice. So you can either take out the gene or you can block the protein with the drug, and it reduces parasite level. And if you go into interferon gamma null mice, where you get the metastasis, the drug blocks development of metastases in the tail. How about that?
Great.
So
Good
this
stuff.
looks like...
Very good stuff.
So, Daniel, based on this, do you think that... So, obviously, IL-17A has broader uses than just targeting Leishmania and making Leishmania worse. Do you think it would be a good idea to target IL-17A?
It's a challenge, right? Because then I think, sort of Dickson brought this up when he was discussing the study is currently what we do is if somebody is infected with Leishmaniasis, we want to know if it's one of these species with metastatic spread. If it's not, then often local treatment. But if it's one of these that could potentially spread, and we'll say Braziliensis is the classic, we would treat with IV therapy very aggressively because we're saying, hey, 5-10% of people down the road, this is going to pop up somewhere and it might be in a bad place. So this is an issue. Or is this going to allow us to somehow change that paradigm? Will we now test to see if you're a Leishmania virus positive? And if you are, is it sufficient just to treat? Or do you say we're going to treat you? And I've seen this, and this is why I'll say I think there is a role, is I've seen people who've had Leishmania Braziliensis, they've been treated with IV therapy with pentavalent antimony, stibio. Gluconate. You want to pronounce that?
Sodium
stibogluconate.
That's right.
So they've been treated with that multiple times. They're coming in now for, let's say, the third treatment. And
heavy metal treatment.
And they're still having problems. And do you add an immune modulator there?
Right.
Or do you even add it, earlier on? So like if this is the failure, you can start going after maybe a perturbation of the immune system that is preventing your therapy from really working.
Yeah.
So I think there's an issue here. We do not have 100% effective treatment for this disease, and we're still trying to understand it.
But you don't want to wait till the first lesion, the metastatic lesion occurs, because that could be years afterwards, right?
True.
And let's say you see a lesion 2 years after the patient had been infected. Do you then see more, or is that just one lesion, or do you typically have multiple lesions?
It depends. It can often just be one other lesion that develops, but it can be
that
multiple.
means you still have parasites in you, right?
Well, that's the amazing thing. I think most of the time when we treat Leishmaniasis, we don't affect a sterile cure. We treat them and we get to a certain level, but we don't think that we sterilize the person completely.
Yeah.
And then that's the problem. So I think a couple interesting things in this story here is, do we start testing up front for viruses? If the person has one of these worrisome and they do not have the virus, what's their chance? Do we need IV therapy? And then maybe we want to look even further is, do they need IV therapy plus an immune modulator right up front?
Yeah, right.
Because we understand.
So obviously you have to do a clinical trial to assess all of this.
Exactly.
Right? The other thing that's interesting that is worth bringing up, so I just did a TWiP at a meeting in Boston where one of my guests, Marion Koopmans, who's head of virology in Rotterdam at the Erasmus Medical Center, she said one of the big problems in diagnostics is it takes too long to validate diagnostic assays, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't have an approved Zika diagnostic. Everything we're doing is, here's the result, and you take it for what it means, right? So if you wanted to develop a diagnostic for this RNA virus, it would take you a while before it's FDA approved, and then you don't have any liability.
Yeah, and it is tough. I have to say, there's tests where we send for tests to be done overseas because of that issue of getting a...
So what
or
is
the
the
CDC will do it for us.
You know what the diagnostic test for cutaneous leishmaniasis is?
What?
Culture. The definitive diagnosis is to take a little edge of the ulcer and put it into a medium called Schneider's medium, which is an insect tissue culture medium. Right. What happens is the amastigotes transform to the promastigotes, and they grow.
And that's an FDA-approved assay?
I'm not sure the FDA approves it, but I know that the laboratories used it for many, many years. The dermatology department here at Columbia University had that test on the books for, I would say, as long as I was a practicing professor here. Before I retired.
It's a hard assay.
It is, but we used to run it because we had someone working on leishmaniasis in our laboratory suite, and so they had the culture media all set, and they would inoculate, and 3 days later you could see the promastigotes.
Yeah, so in a lot of places they're using the NAT, nucleic acid amplification testing, which is going to do two things. One, it's going to probably have better sensitivity because the culture technique is a little challenging, but it also is going to give you, that additional information you need. Is it one of these types of Leishmania with a potential for metastatic spread?
Yeah. Dickson, by the way, in the discussion, they say no large-scale epidemiological data exist to assess the true correlation between virus presence and metastatic leishmaniasis. They're waiting for you. You're an epidemiologist, right?
No, I'm not an epidemiologist.
What are you?
What Emily is right. That's a great question.
A parasitologist.
Ecologist.
You're an ecologist?
I am an ecologist.
Not a parasitologist anymore?
Parasitology is a subset of ecological studies.
So is virology as well?
It's more microbiological.
Okay. Anyway, interesting. But realistically,
now they know what to look for. They can start looking.
Well, they have... Oh, that's what I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
Digoxin, can we use that to treat this? Would that have other effects that would be negative?
Again, it's that issue of the therapeutic index I think we acquainted people with last time. Yeah. It's a question of what doses of digoxin. You want them to be well below this toxic level. You don't want people with like blurry vision and the world looks yellow. You also probably don't want to be at doses where you're going to have much of a cardiac effect. So I think that's what it comes down to, is that if you could use, and it would be great to use something that's already out there, already being used, already we have experience with, if it could be used at a low enough dose that you wouldn't have untoward effects, but still might have impacts potentially.
I just don't know what the endpoint is for your clinical study. Right?
You know what? We need a little more information first.
Yeah.
I mean, ideally, we want to somehow do that first big study you talked about, is really pin down, the likelihood with and without the virus that you're going to end up with metastatic disease.
Yeah.
And then potentially you could take that high-risk group, say, okay, you're the high-risk group, you've got the bad type of Leishmania, you've got the virus. We know that even with treatment, we're going to have 2% that are going to come back. We're going to give half of you digoxin, half of you don't. We see if we drop that. Can we make that zero? Can we drop it significantly?
Right. The downside to Leishmaniasis cutaneous is that it leaves an awful scar.
Right.
So you don't want that.
All right, Daniel, do you have, by any chance, another case for
I do have
us?
a case, and this is a case I just saw, just got admitted.
He's pulling from his white coat.
I'm going to pull out one of my little cards.
He's got this little patient inside of his white coat. Listen, I'm suffering from white coat syndrome just looking at it.
I know, your blood pressure has gone
way
high.
over.
Plus, we should say that he's wearing a bow tie today, which I haven't seen in many months.
It's a special bow tie.
What does it say?
All of his bow ties are special.
Is it viruses on it?
Actually, this one is just for Vincent. It has the symbol of the Rotary Club International,
right?
And there's a virus on here that they are hoping to eradicate by 2010.
Boy, gosh, I can't even.
They're hoping that by
when could it be?
2010
They want to
there'll be no more
eradicate
cases.
it, along with the virologists who studied it. It has to be polio.
It's very funny.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yes, this is my polio,
Nice.
just for you, Vincent.
Thank you very
I
much.
wore it. Okay. So this is a woman who is. So this is evolving. So we'll find out when we come back to the next TWiP if what my initial impression is really what's
'cause
going
you don't know
on.
the answer yet,
But
right?
I feel like I do.
Okay.
I did
Lay it on us.
I did a physical exam. I have a history. This is a 66-year-old woman, and the story is she was born in Guinea. You know where Guinea is there in Africa?
Western Africa. They had a problem with Ebola not too long ago, right?
Western Sub-Saharan Africa, right? So Ebola is going to be a concern here.
Yeah.
She's coming in. She was born, she grew up there, and then she moved here to the U.S. where she has lived for about 10 years. And she just retired. And when she retired, her mother's been having some eye issues back in Guinea. So she decides she and a couple of her daughters who are living here are going to go back for a 3-month visit to stay with her mother. So she's been back to Guinea one time since she left in 2011 for a while. And now here we are 5 years later, she goes back. And she's coming.
2016, right?
So it's 2016 right now that she's seeing us. And 2011 was when she last visited.
Just once. Oh, all right. So that was the last visit.
That was last
2011.
visit. So at age 56, 10 years ago, and we'll say 2006, she immigrates to the U.S. and she works here, has a job. She just retires. And now she's in Guinea for 3 months.
Got it.
And she comes back to the U.S. About a week ago. And her problem
Hold
is
on, let me get this. I thought her last visit was 2011.
So 2011.
Till now, she's been in Guinea?
Now she comes back. She's in the U.S.
Yeah.
She just retires from her job. And 3 months ago, she
went
goes
back.
to Guinea for a 3-month visit. Okay, so what are we now? We're in September. So we go back, say June. June, she flies over to Guinea. She's there June, July, August, into early September. She gets back to the U.S. a week ago. And she is reporting headaches, fevers, and in general feeling poorly. Okay. She says that while she's over there, she was staying in the big city. That's where her family is from. And she stays with her family, with her mom, who's in her 80s, having this eye issue. She has her own private toilet and her own private room, but everyone else has to share.
A real toilet.
A real toilet and a nice home. They seemed a little sensitive when I brought up the issue. Do you have screens? You
I was
sleep
gonna
under
ask you
bed
that.
nets? And they're like, no, why would we need those?
No screens or bed.
No screens are bad. And that's an interesting issue. And, we always tell people who go back, you got to have your bed net. There's a sensitivity to like, well, what are you doing with that?
Yeah.
Almost like insulting and upsetting, And remember, she's going home. I mean, she's from Guinea. She's just going home. And so what's all this about? She doesn't take any sort of medication prophylaxis, doesn't see any travel doctors. She just goes back to...
Now, she doesn't have a husband over there, right?
So she's married for 40 years, was living here in the U.S. with her husband, decided that wasn't going well, and so she's recently divorced from her from her husband. She has had 10 children, 5 of which are no longer alive.
Is she seeing anybody else?
They die from?
No, she's not sexually active, not with anyone.
What did they die from?
Various different things, unfortunately, in Africa.
Dear.
It's not atypical.
No, unfortunately not. So we'll get a little more into her. So these fevers, a little more characteristic. So it starts off with fever, high fever, lasts for, seems like several hours, and then breaks. She feels better. And then she gets another fever, lasts for several hours, gets concerned, goes to one of the emergency rooms here in New York
That's the
City.
same day that you got a...
No, this is 2 days later.
You had to say 2 days later.
2 days later. No, that's important.
Thank you. I thought it would be.
It's a couple days later. We're going to say 2 to 3 days later. She gets another fever.
Right.
And she goes to an emergency room, and they do a whole bunch of Ebola screening questions, right?
Yeah.
Have you been at funerals? Have you been, et cetera? And there's a whole screening thing we now do. And so she's negative for that. They do a little bit of blood work. They send her back out into the world.
Really?
Okay. 2-3 days later, she has a high fever, starts getting a little bit of double vision, headache is worse, she's feeling worse, and she comes to a place where amazing things happen, the emergency room here at Columbia.
You bet.
She doesn't have any diarrhea, no discomfort when she pees.
No backache?
Her back doesn't hurt. That's a good question.
Did it ever?
She's starting to feel like her mouth is a little bit dry. And
you did not discharge her.
No. We end up here at Columbia deciding that, it's odd, and I think different hospitals have different ideas, but we like to admit sick people and take care of them and not discharge them until they are feeling better. We're trying it out.
Could work. It might.
It could work. We'll give it time. But that's what we're going with.
You're going to go with that one.
You're
sure?
I use the analogy of you don't want to leave the chocolates in the car. And the stories. Someone comes in, you do this whole it's your wife's anniversary, right? And you go and you research and what's the best chocolate, and you buy them and you put them in the car and you take her all out to dinner, and then you go and you realize the next morning I left the chocolates in the car. Oops. You gotta do everything, and part of everything is that getting them in, getting them treated, and then making sure when they are done being treated that they're going to continue and have a successful outcome. So I'll give you some other things: past medical history, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes.
Overweight?
I wouldn't say that she's overweight. I mean, she's not thin. I mean, she could be thinner, but I wouldn't say obese. She has her appendix out in the past, years back, nothing acute. She's on a few home medications for blood pressure, cholesterol, metformin for the diabetes. She apparently has an unknown reaction to novocaine. I don't know if that's going to come up.
I'm sorry, I missed that one.
Novocaine.
She doesn't allergic.
She doesn't like novocaine. It's not clear exactly what that reaction was, but we don't want to be given novocaine. Doesn't smoke, doesn't drink. She's completely independent, able to do all these things. She actually lives here in Washington Heights when she's here in the U.S., so she's back.
You do a physical?
Back home here. Oh, are you ready for that?
You bet.
A physical was done.
And?
So her temperature, we'll start off, her temperature is quite high, 39.4. She's breathing along at about 14, 16. Blood pressure was okay. Heart rate was a little bit of 100. We look at her eyes. The sclera is nice and white. Mouth looks normal. Neck is supple. Lungs cleared auscultation. Heart, a little bit rapid. She has a normal S1, S2, but a 2/6 systolic murmur with a little bit of radiation to the left carotid. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and say this is, in my opinion, a flow murmur. Okay. So a high flow state I'm getting from this. She does not have jugular venous distension. She doesn't look fluid overloaded. Now they have given her IV fluids before I examine her. Her abdomen, right upper quadrant, slight enlargement of the liver, but just slight. Not particularly tender. I am able to palpate a spleen tip in the left upper quadrant, and I'll say it's a slightly enlarged spleen, just above upper limits of normal. So we have mild splenomegaly, little bit of hepato, so slightly enlarged spleen and liver, a normal bowel sound, soft, non-tender, and no rash. I don't see any rash anywhere. And we get some blood work. And on the blood work, we have an elevated white count. So our white cells are up, and there's bands, 9% bands. The eosinophil count is 0.1. And her platelets are down at 79. And her hemoglobin is at 11.
Her platelets were 79.
Right? So her platelets are low at 79.
Yeah, hemoglobin.
Her white count was actually a little bit elevated. And we're seeing a left shift with bands.
Got it. And the hemoglobin was 11, you said, right?
Yes.
Remind us again of what normal would be.
Normal would be a little higher. So we're going to say it's a little bit anemic here. So a little bit of anemia, high white count, low platelets, left shift.
She's no longer menstruating?
She's no longer menstruating. She's in her 60s.
Okay.
Bilirubin was 1.5, so slight increase in the bilirubin. Bicarb is a little bit down at 20, So there's a slight bit of a lactate, which we detect as well. Chest X-ray was clear. And then we're going to go ahead and do some diagnostic tests at this point.
I have some more questions on the CBC.
Okay, tell me about the CBC.
Tell me about the red cells.
They are the MCV, the mean corpuscular volume. The red cells are a little small, 79.4.
Any unusual featers about? I mean, any?
You want to look at a blood smear or something? Are you asking, or do you want to look at the automated?
I want the diff.
That might be
I want the diff.
Okay, well, so the diff, as I mentioned, is 81.9% neutrophils, 13.6% lymphs, 3.4% monos, 0.1% eos, and 0.3% basophils.
And the red cells?
On the automated, they're not going to tell us anything. All they're going to tell us is that the MCV is decreased at 79.4.
Okay.
But we can, potentially put in our list of requests. You might want to look at a smear if you want.
Reticulocyte count, I would like it to see, or perhaps normoblasts.
Okay, so you might want to see
cytocytes.
Okay, so you might want to have somebody look at a peripheral smear.
Yeah, I'd love them
retics.
to do that. I'd actually love them to do that.
And anything else that might be there?
I'd like them to look as long as they have to.
Okay. 30 minutes, is that what you're after?
It's 20, actually, but that's okay.
Thick, thin, or both? What do you want?
Little of each.
Okay. Anything else you would like to know? Animals. I asked her all about animals. That was funny. That was when they got all upset. Dogs? Of course not. We don't like animals. I asked about cats. We don't like cats. I was like, well, if you don't have cats, who keeps the marmoset rats out of your dwelling? Okay.
Ooh.
We also checked hearing. Her hearing was completely unimpaired.
But she lives in a city. Is it a modern city that she lives in? Because she had her own
somewhat modern.
Is it the rainy season?
So it is the rainy season right now. We're in the middle of the rainy season. The rainy season will extend until the end of November. So we're right in the middle of the rainy season.
When she was there.
And I joked with her about that.
I
joked with her because, June through November is the rainy season. So she showed up right at the beginning of the rainy season. She's there for the rainy season. Her daughters say that whenever it rains, she loves to go out and just have the warm rain fall onto her.
So she walks outside.
So she walks outside
during the day
in the warm rain. And she likes to be out. And they don't have any cats or anything to keep out any of the rodents.
He said that twice.
So you might be worried about things like Lassa fever and things like this too, but that's a different animal.
Yeah.
Well, I never said that every single case would be a parasite.
No, you didn't, or at least a eukaryotic parasite.
Mastomus natalensis.
Thank you.
Is that present in Guinea?
Yeah, sure.
It's all over Africa, right?
It's in West Africa.
We know there have been large outbreaks of that.
We do.
Recently.
We do. In fact, there is an outbreak of Lassa fever going on now in Nigeria.
Is that right?
That is correct. According to ProMed, at least.
I was just typing in ProMed. Let's see. Yellow fever. There's an outbreak of yellow fever right in Angola. There's so many infectious diseases here.
Indeed.
I don't see Lassa in a long time.
I'll tell you a little bit. You guys didn't ask about food, so I'll mention that.
We got sidetracked.
She's very adamant about the fact that all the food that she eats there is prepared in the home.
Right.
But apparently, she is so excited when she goes back to eat all her favorite foods. And so...
What are those? Some temp?
Well, it's funny. I was asking, I was trying to, what is all our favorite foods? And I was thinking I was going to hear all kinds of exotic stuff.
No.
Yeah.
And there's actually a saying, apparently, and I asked them because I've heard this from other countries, rice. She loves to eat rice. And so she eats a lot of rice.
What else? Meat?
I was trying to get any meats, anything exotic, and her daughter was just like, she just eats so much rice. So I was not able to get much more than that. That's the fact that she eats lots of rice. And I forget, there's a saying somewhere in the world, unless you eat rice, you're still hungry. It's something about rices.
Well, it's a filling thing, yeah.
This woman was admitted when?
She was just admitted.
Just happened today.
I just examined her this morning.
Oh, look at this. This is fresh.
This is fresh.
It's very fresh. So I would love to know what her pattern of fever is over the next 3 or 4
Well, you've got it already that it...
Well,
every
I'd like to see a reinforcement of that pattern, unless they have already decided to start treatment.
Well, we've got 3 fevers so far.
So we have 3 fevers, and there was a 2 to 3 day gap between the 3 fevers.
Well, that's it.
And the fevers last for several.
This is what you're getting, Dickson. You could go to her room and ask her. They wouldn't let you in.
Probably tell me.
You need to put your white coat on.
I've done that.
With an ID.
I've done
now,
that.
she speaks mainly French. But she understands English quite well. So there was a little bit of
Okay.
I mean, I think we've asked all the questions.
Yes.
To be honest.
Yep.
And now we're just waiting for the result.
She does say that. What does she say? She denies any sick contacts, no exposure to healthcare settings. Nobody else over there or here is sick. She denied bug bites. I thought that was interesting.
Has she ever had malaria?
Yes, a couple times before.
Thank you.
She denied bug bites, and you saw none on physical examination, obviously, because this is too long.
I was actually looking for bug bites. I was specifically looking for that. And, there's the last question I asked her, and I won't tell you her answer. But I always do this, and I always, and I didn't do it in this case because, they're medical students and I want to sort of, but I told them, I said, this is what I usually ask people is, all right, what do you think you have? Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. What do you're from there.
You're not going to tell us what
and I'm not
going
to tell you.
No.
We'll talk about it next time.
Well, remember the case from Michael, what's his name, from McGill?
Yes.
Yes. The psychiatrist said...
Michael Lippman, and they said, do you know why you're here? And he said, yes, I have the sleeping sickness. and they're like, yes, we know that. And you're like, oh.
And it went right over everyone's head.
Could have saved them a year.
La maladie del... Say it. How do you say it in French?
La maladie du sommeil.
Exactly. La maladie du sommeil.
So I had it wrong in the first version, which of TWiP, I used that as the title, and someone wrote in like within an hour and said it's not de, it's du. I had de.
You're using the informal.
La maladie du sommeil. Yeah.
Well, that's a great case.
It's a great case.
All right, so we'll do some stuff, and we'll try to diagnose and make this woman better.
And you know what it is, Dickson.
Well, I think I know what it is, but you're never sure until you see the definitive diagnosis.
Well, that's the whole point. But here on TWiP, it's a...
I have a good
challenge
idea,
your brain.
I have a good idea.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Dan.
So remember, here's Sub-Saharan, West Africa. Come in to see us during a Lassa outbreak in the area. Periodic fever.
No, Lassa fever doesn't look like that.
I want to tell you about the other sponsor of this episode, Drobo. This family of safe, expandable, simple-to-use storage solutions. Drobos are designed to protect your important data forever. Now, we have discussed how Drobos work. They're connected to your Mac or PC using a high-speed interface, and they're also network-attacked Drobos, so you can share over a network. They come in a variety of sizes, 5 drive bays, 8 drive bays, 12 drive bays. Now, this is not a typical product. It's unusual. They have developed a new kind of RAID. It's way beyond garden variety RAID. And they're unique because, well, first of all, they're designed to protect your important data forever. No other storage array sets such a high goal for itself. And why is this? And since this isn't biology, we can answer why questions. This Drobo began when the founder of the company, Dickson, listen to this. This is funny. Founder of the company, he lost his honeymoon pictures.
Oh, no.
That's great.
They were stored on a
it's
RAID,
not great. It's horrible, but
they were stored on a RAID system. And
he lost it.
And he lost it. The drive
oh, my gosh.
failed.
He was doing everything he was supposed to.
So,
did that cost him his marriage?
Well, I don't know. It doesn't say here in my notes.
Honey, I'm going to found a company and make this all better.
That's right. No, right.
So this made him think I need something better, and that's how Drobo was formed. You know what David Quammen said the other day? Everything starts somewhere.
You got it. You got it. You got it.
Drobo started with honeymoon pictures.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe his wife was happy he lost them. I don't
Possible.
know. We don't know.
No. I did throw Drobo into a conversation the other day. I'm sort of trying to help. This woman was talking. I was like, well, is it a Drobo? And she said, what? I said, a Drobo, a family of safe, expandable, yet simple use storage arrays.
That's great. So anyway, Drobos protect your data against drive failure because if a drive fails, your data is on the other drives that are in the array. And so you can just take that drive out and put a new one in. It's still there.
Hey.
For how long? Forever. The thing keeps running. And as long as you replace drives or add new drives, you need just add, if you want to increase capacity, you just add a new hard drive. They will get bigger until, you run out of spaces, and then you can, You could use bigger drives, if you will. They get bigger and bigger every year. They're also really simple, as Dickson will tell you. He's got one running, and it's still running. It was easy to set up. I didn't even have to come and... Did I set it up for you? I did, sorry. But he didn't really need me to set it up. Well, you wouldn't have done it. You just would have taken a long time.
What was another external hard drive? I mean, there's a lot of choices out there, folks. But this is the best one, I think, because it tells you when your Drobo is starting to fill up. It changes color. Mine's still green.
Yes, that's exactly it.
Mine is still green, by the way.
There are lights on the side. They're green when there's lots of space. And then they turn yellow when they're starting to fill up. And then red says you have to put a new drive or put a new drive in. Right. And you know when a drive has failed, it blinks red. So it's really quite clear. So it's designed to be very simple to use and just work. And our listeners can save $100 off of their purchase of a Drobo 5D, 5DT, or 5N. Those are all 5-bay units. Or if you want an 8-drive or a 12-drive unit. I don't think you need a 12-drive, do you, Dickson?
No, I wouldn't know what to do with it. I would sell the other 6.
I think you should take more pictures, Dickson.
I do, too.
Well, you know what? You could set up a cloud thing and sell it to other people. How about that? You could sell the storage. So save $100 off of these 5D, 5DT, 5N, 8 or 12 drive system. Go to drobostore.com and use the discount code MICROBE100. All right, MICROBE100. You can get $100 off and check it out. We thank Drobo for their support of TWiP. And finally, the last thing we have to do is read some email.
Okay.
We only have 2.
That should make it pretty straightforward.
So it will be very easy to do. And let's have you
all right, Steve writes, because I actually looked at this link. Hi, TWIPsters. Makes you think. Mosquitoes can be successfully trapped with baits that include carbon dioxide, mimicking our breathing, but to produce the CO2 where needed would be equivalent to providing an extra meal per day to the affected peoples. Discuss. And what they did here is they actually have these... Oh, it shows it down here. They had these solar-powered mosquito traps, and they set them up in this area, and they showed there was a reduction in the mosquito prevalence. So he's got a quote here. He said, the quantities of carbon dioxide in existing lures are comparable with those generated by a living human being. As a result, inclusion of carbon dioxide in the mixture released by the traps deployed in this study would require a similar quantity of reduced carbon to providing everyone on Rosinga Island with an extra meal or a bus trip to the mainland every day. Okay. Okay.
What do you think about that, Dickson?
I'll have to take more time than just this to come up with a
No, but let's say if it costs a meal a day to make enough CO2 to get rid of the mosquitoes, is that worth it?
Depends on what the mosquitoes are. Remember, this is a daytime trap. I think I would prefer to have a nighttime trap for some of the mosquitoes that I'm thinking about.
It would depend on where it is, right?
Yeah, exactly right. So there's 1,600 different species of mosquitoes, and about 300 of them transmit malaria to people, and about 4 of them dominate those 300 that actually transmit the malaria. So malaria-biting mosquitoes, the Anopheles mosquitoes, are usually night feeders.
Yeah, they actually were reducing, it was the Anopheles funestis that they were going after here. So I don't know. I mean, if these solar-powered
I think it's
traps had like a battery aspect, like did they continue to work through the night? What exactly?
Yeah, they must have.
Yeah, because you want to actually kill them. I think that's great. People say we should kill the mosquitoes. There's only about 30 of them, right? We get rid of those. We're all good.
Absolutely.
The other 270, they can have their way.
You bet.
Why is it an extra meal to produce the CO2? Is that the cost of this machine? Because once it's up, it doesn't cost anything, right? Because it's solar-powered. Let's just ask Bill Gates to pay for it.
Right. He'll be glad.
And then they would say, well, then he could give a meal a day to these people. He can do that too.
Exactly. You have 2 meals today per day. He's got.
I don't like these kind of trade-offs. Right? I mean,
yeah,
if you miss a meal a day every day, are you going to die?
Heck no.
You could just have the other meals be slightly bigger.
Yeah.
Unless you live in a place where you only eat once a day.
Yeah, no, I mean, in certain parts of the world, then, when they say missing a meal a day, they mean
on the other hand, a mosquito can kill you, right, Dickson?
Got it.
So
no, the mosquito could never kill you. It's what they transmit that's going to kill you, actually.
Yeah. Of course, Dickson.
That's the gun.
It's not
argument,
sushi.
right? It's not the gun.
It's not the sushi either.
It's the person who
Yes.
pulls the trigger.
Yeah,
What is it? The person who pulls the trigger, the gun, or the bullet that kills you?
You have to have it all together there.
I thought it wasn't sushi.
Okay.
Can you read the next one?
Yeah.
And last.
Very hard. Sophie writes, Dear TWiP team, in the latest episode, number 116, Vincent asked about parasites in Japan. I know Daniel and Dickson can tell you much more about this, but it made me think of Kariyama Fever. I'm an MD, and I heard about Kariyama Fever in medical school. It is the acute manifestation of infection with schistosoma species, and it used to be common in Japan before Japan became a rich and developed country. As I recall, and please do correct me if I'm wrong, Daniel and Dickson, there was at least one village/area in Japan where schistosomiasis was so common that when women married men from other areas of Japan, the men would become very sick and potentially die very shortly after the men started working in the rice fields. This was supposedly due to the massive exposure to schistosomes of completely, in parentheses, immune, naive individuals, whereas the locals had built up some sort of immunity and most likely were already infected. Rice fields are full of fresh water, as you know, and this was the perfect place for schistosoma to be transmitted when the whole village worked all day in the rice fields. I have not been able to find anything to substantiate this story online or in Harrison's Internal Medicine. Supposedly, this story is why the acute manifestations of schistosomiasis is named after a place in Japan. My brother-in-law was born and grew up in Japan, and I had the privilege to visit him and my sister in Japan with my mother and brother back in 2010. And I totally agree with you, Vincent. It's an amazing place. I really loved it and would love to go back. Thanks for a wonderful podcast and keep up the good work. Cheers. So Kariyama is a region of Japan. And indeed, we didn't know anything about that portion of the life cycle of this parasite until well after the Second World War, because the Japanese literature was sequestered. And all of these references were in Japanese. So for a while, I mean, I almost think that in this country it became illegal to be able to read Japanese. That's how phobic we were towards the Japanese, unfortunately. So Kariyama fever means the acute onset of a heavy infection with schistosoma, in this case, schistosoma japonicum. And the way they eradicated it from Japan, the last known cases were in 1976. We know this for sure because the Japanese used water buffalo to plow their fields with for the rice paddies. Water buffalo are susceptible to the schistosoma as well as the people. So what they figured out, very clever, of course, was that if you substitute horses, a non-susceptible host, for the water buffalo, a susceptible host, and at the same time the farmers held off having their bowel movement until they got back home, then it didn't matter how much pollution into the rice fields the horses did in terms of their liquid and solid wastes. There was no transmission of the infection to the snails, and they wiped it out epidemiologically. It was incredible, in fact, and that was the very last time that schistosoma japonicum appeared in any of the Japanese islands. That's quite a great story, I think.
Do they still call it Kariyama fever, Daniel? Do you ever hear that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it's got that name, even in Africa, where Kariyama is obviously not the case.
Yeah, they call it Kariyama fever.
They still call it that.
There's a place in Japan called Katayama?
Yeah.
It's a district in Japan.
That's
where it was described.
That's right.
Fascinating.
I'd love to know where she went to medical school, because to have that fact related to you during a medical lecture, I want to know which school that was.
Okay, Sophie, you heard what Dickson wants to know.
Let us hear.
Did you tell your students when you taught? You would say Kariyama fever, yeah?
I did.
Wow. Cool. Neat.
I didn't say it quite like that.
Did you try to pronounce it with the nice Japanese?
Kariyama fever.
And yes, I will. I will say Japan is a wonderful place. I was just there a few weeks ago. I'm going to be back in December for a couple of weeks.
You went on your Thai trip? You stopped?
When I was in Thailand, I've got some family in Tokyo, so I thought, hey, I'll just stop by, say hello, have lunch.
That's cool.
You can find TWiP at iTunes and at microbe.tv/TWiP. And please consider becoming a patron of TWiP. You can go to patreon.com/microbetv to contribute as little as $1 a month, or you can go to microbe.tv/contribute for some other options. Send us your questions and comments, as well as your case guesses, educated guesses, of course. send them to TWiP@microbe.tv. We only had a few this time. We only had 5 or 6.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, I know it's September. Everyone's back to school and so forth.
Maybe it was a tough one because we had some right answers.
It could be that it was a tough one, yes.
You know, they shouldn't all be easy.
Daniel Griffin is here at Columbia University Herbert and Florence Irving Medical Center.
Oh, my gosh.
I think that's the name. Can we just call it Columbia University Medical Center?
Sure, I'm happy with that. I'm here at Columbia.
Thank you, Daniel.
Oh, thank you.
Until the dean calls us up and says, you better say it right. But
I hope the dean is listening. I would love to know that the dean is listening.
And I would venture that no dean anywhere in the world is listening to TWiP.
Would take the time to listen.
If I'm wrong, tell me. But that would have require a dean to email, and deans don't take the time. Dickson Despommier is at Racaniello.org. And you should check out his new website, thelivingriver.org, if you love fishing, right?
Or ecology.
Would you like people to go there?
I would love them to go there. Yeah, sure. It's a thing of beauty because nature is a thing of beauty.
Nature can sometimes be nasty, Dickson.
That's an anthropocentric view.
Can be nasty.
That's an anthropocentric view.
It can kill people.
If you're the gazelle,
it can kill animals.
And a lion attacks you, that's when it's nasty.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I mean. Nature is not human-hearted.
Sure.
Yeah, it's anthropocentric. Thank you, Dickson.
It's a pleasure.
I'm Vincent Racaniello. You can find me at virology.ws. The music you hear on TWiP is composed and performed by Ronald Jenkins. Please find his work at ronaldjenkins.com. I want to thank today's sponsors, CuriosityStream and Drobo. You've been listening to This Week in Parasitism. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back soon. Another TWiP
is parasitic.